Okay, hello students, good evening, and in this lectures we are discussing some drawbacks and limitations of the Ohm's law, and in this lectures we are finished the content of the Ohm's law. Let's start to discussions the limitations of Ohm's law. Limitations of Ohm's law. Ohm's law, the V is equal to IR. What is the Ohm's law? That is V is equal to IR. The potential difference is directly proportional to the current, or current is directly proportional to the potential difference between the two ends of the conductors which can be applied. Then some devices are obey the laws, or some materials or devices. The materials and devices which can obey this law or curve, or I versus V curve is linear or straight line and passing through the origins हे जे काही लिहित आहे आपण, जे काही ओहम्स लॉ मध्ये एक छोटासा ग्राफ काढला होता, ते ग्राफचं जे काही एक्सप्लेनेशन्स आपण या ठिकाणी लिहित आहे. अँड द पासिंग थ्रू द ओरिजिन्स अँड inclined, that is V axis, and this devices is called, this materials or devices is called, and this such device is called linear device or ohmic device. Some materials and device which can be obey the same law of Ohm's law, जे काही V is equal to IR, the curves between the curve which can be drawn, the graph, the V versus I or I versus V, the curves will be straight line and passing through the origins and inclined with the V axis. I will be underlined some words, that is materials and device which can be obey the law, this law, and I versus V curve is linear or straight line which can be passing through the origin, and this devices is called as linear devices or ohmic devices. The such devices and the curves are straight line and passing through the centers, and these devices, the resistance of these devices is constant. Is constant. रेजिस्टन्स असणार, हे कसं असणार, कॉन्स्टंट, दॅट इज द प्रपोर्शनॅलिटी कॉन्स्टंट म्हणून आपण त्या ठिकाणी कन्सिडर केलेलं होतं. देन द रेजिस्टन्स आर ऑफ दिस डिव्हाइसेस विल बी कॉन्स्टंट. देन some devices or some materials which could not obey the laws, the devices for which the IV curve is not a straight line, not a straight line, and which could not passing through the origins, and not passing origins, or maybe passing origins, but हे पॉइंट लिहिणं काय एवढं गरजेचं नाही आहे. नॉट पासिंग ओरिजिन्स, अँड दिस डिव्हाइस इज कॉल्ड, this device is called non-linear device, non-linear device or non-ohmic device, non-ohmic device. Some devices, and I will be drawn the same diagram here. एक असं डिव्हाइस आहे, त्या डिव्हाइसचं जे काही कर्व्स व्ही आय दॅट इज आर्बिटरी युनिट्स आहे, आणि व्ही हे काय आहे व्होल्टमध्ये आहे, आणि त्याचं जे काही कर्व्स आहे द कर्व अशा पद्धतीने काहीतरी कर्व आहे. इट इज नॉट अ स्ट्रेट लाईन, आणि या डिव्हाइसला म्हटलं जातं नॉन ओहमिक डिव्हाइस, अँड दिस कर्व इज कॉल्ड ॲज नॉन ओहमिक कर्व, अँड दिस डिव्हाइस इज कॉल्ड ॲज non-ohmic devices, and these are do not obey the Ohm's law, and these are do not obey Ohm's law, do not obey Ohm's law, and resistance of these devices in the function of, and जे काही रेजिस्टन्स आहे ते कॉन्स्टंट असणार आहे. कसं असणार आहे? द resistance of these devices in the function of I or in the function of V. रेजिस्टन्स या ठिकाणी कॉन्स्टंट असणार आहे, इन द फंक्शन ऑफ I अँड V मध्ये ते असणार आहे. अँड सम एक्झाम्पल्स वी कॅन बी यूज ऑफ, दॅट इज सम एक्झाम्पल्स, दॅट इज liquid electrolyte. It is one of the examples. They do not follow the Ohm's law. That is liquid electrolyte. Liquid electrolytes, that is vacuum tube, and vacuum tube and one of the junctions, vacuum tube, junction diode, and thermistors. junction diode, जे जंक्शन डायोडचं जे काही कर्व असणार आहे ते आय इंटू व्ही जर कर्व काढलं असेल तर स्ट्रेट लाईन येणार नाही, अशा पद्धतीनं एक्सपोनेन्शियल मे बी डिफरंट कर्व त्या ठिकाणी असणार आहे. देन अनदर इज अ thermistors. These are some examples which could not obey the Ohm's law, and the curve of these devices is not a straight line. The curve between the V and I. Consider the resistance R for such non-linear devices at a particular value of V. Some resistance, that is R, for a non-linear device at a particular value of of V is given by, then we find the resistance या ठिकाणी कॉन्स्टंट नसणार आहे आणि ते जे काय असणार इन द फंक्शन ऑफ V अँड I मध्ये असणार आहे. देन R इज इक्वल टू, वी नो दॅट, देन R जे काय असणार आपण जे फॉर्म्युला लिहिलेलं होतं V डिवायडेड बाय I, दिस इज द फॉर्म्युला ऑफ R and we use some limits for the functions. Limit I tends to 0, then delta V divided by delta I. This is also equal to, in the smallest terms, in the smallest value, that is dV and di. This is all about the resistance of that device which could not be obey the Ohm's law, and the curves between the I and V of that devices will be here. Here the delta V is the potential difference, delta V is the potential difference between two values of V, or two values of potentials, between two values of potential, that is P. Then what are the two values we can be discussing in here after, but we are revisions of these limitations or drawbacks of the Ohm's law up to of that points. Then some materials which can obey the law of the Ohm's law, and these materials or these devices is called as ohmic devices, and of the linear graph or the curve between the I and V of that graph will be straight line, linear, and which can be passes through the origins and inclined with a V axis. This is called as a linear or ohmic devices. The resistance of the linear devices or ohmic devices will be constant. The resistance of this will be constant. The devices for which the curve is not a straight line and it is do not passing through, but I will be cut off these points, and not passing straight line, and these devices is called as a non-linear devices or non-ohmic devices. I will be drawn here of that curve. And then some examples which could not be obey the laws, some devices, that is a liquid electrolyte is one of the devices. The curve of that I and V is not a straight line. Vacuum tube, junction diode and thermistors, it is some examples, they could not be obey the Ohm's law. Then these are do not obey the Ohm's law, and the resistance of these device is in the functions of I and V, it is not a constant. Then the resistance R for the non-linear devices will be find using of this formula. I will be under the bracket of this formula, and we know that the delta V is the potential difference between, it is two, delta V is the potential difference between two values of the potentials, and these two values of the potential is V minus delta V divided by 2, and another one is V plus delta V divided by 2. This is the potential difference, that is this is the value of delta V, and we find the difference between these two and we cancel of this, and I'll be right here minus delta V by 2 minus V into minus delta V by 2. V minus V is plus, then it is cancelled to each other, then minus minus is plus, then plus 2 delta V divided by 2, and 2 will be cancelled, then delta V is the difference between these two. And delta I is change in current, and in these lectures I will be change the topics, and it is now the finish of the content about the Ohm's law. आणि या ठिकाणी संपलेला आहे. आणि नेक्स्ट लेक्चरपासून आपण थोडासा डिफरंट टर्म्स ॲज ए रेजिस्टर्स म्हणजे काय असतं ते या ठिकाणी आपण स्टडी करणार आहे. देन study the electric powers and electric potentials. I will be studying in the next lectures, and limitations of the Ohm's law now finish.